believe.
Okay, good.
And yeah, we're now recording, Rob. So thank you for joining me to discuss what advice or what word we've received from council. Could you update myself and WTU where we are, please?
Yeah, hi Phil, and hello to all the WTU members. So we submitted the Home Office response to council, and we asked for his views on the next steps. He has come back basically saying it's quite clear the government is not going to give way on any points, and you can see that they've made. I mean, it was a fairly substantial response. His council's concern is the cost implications. So he's perfectly happy to crack on, but he needs you and the membership to be fully aware that in High Court litigation of this type, if you lose, then you can be ordered to pay your opposition's legal costs. And in a matter like this, where you're going up against the full weight of the state and the government, that of course can be substantial. Not only could you be ordered...
substantial? I mean,
look,
I mean, substantial to some, just as a ballpark, you know, or
yeah, sure, you're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds. If you think about, you know, the resources the government has, they will instruct the government legal service to defend the matter. They will probably have 2, maybe 3 barristers, including a QC, and QCs are what, £650 an hour or something ridiculous like that. So you can imagine their costs will rack up very quickly. And there's 2 issues. Is one, if the challenge is lost, then the court can order us to pay the government's costs, which would really stick in the craw. I'm sure you would agree.
Yes, it would.
But 2, the court could actually insist that we provide evidence that we can afford to pay the government's cost before the contested hearing actually starts, and they call it security for costs. So the government can actually say to the court, we want to know that in the event that we win, our costs can be paid by the other side, and the court can ask for those funds to be deposited into court and held there pending the outcome of the case. So that is council's concern. It's not a position on the merits of the case. He's always said it will be challenging, and we know that going up against the government is always going to be difficult. He just wants you and the WTU to be aware this is what could happen. The government could insist that funds are deposited into court to cover their costs in the event that we lose the case. That you can obviously imagine we can't do the same, because the government obviously could cover our costs in the event that we win. They would have to pay our costs, and you know, we can't go in there and say we want proof that the government can afford to pay our legal costs. So that's the current situation.
So whereas we thought before, crikey, we might have to raise maybe 50 to 150,000 pounds for our legal costs moving forward, we would actually need to raise significantly more to be able to cover in the eventuality of a loss, in essence.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's not something I would want the WTU to be spending their money on, you know, having to pay the government's legal costs. It would just be entirely wrong. So I've been having a hard think about what approach we can take which will limit that potential cost exposure. And that's where we were thinking of a real test case, you know, and I see you've been working very closely with Cedar Future, which is great. And, you know, I like Guy Coxon and the guys over there. And potentially that would be a better route for us, because obviously with our engagement with the Home Office, we clearly know their position now. We clearly know where they stand. A test case in the Crown Court, which could then be taken onto the Court of Appeal, the likely costs implications of that would be far lower, and there wouldn't be any insistence from the court or the government of a deposit of funds, security for costs at the outset. And I was really thinking about this actually quite hard last night. You would be the best test case, Phil. I mean, it would be entirely appropriate. No, exactly. And obviously I can't encourage you to go and do anything that would get yourself arrested or anything like that, but that would seem to me to be the most perfect solution, a test case with you at the forefront of it, and the WTU and Cedar Future behind you. That would certainly limit any potential cost exposure.
See, I I would feel willing and prepared to do that for many reasons, really. One is that I feel I utilize cannabis not just for its therapeutic potential, but I use it for creativity, for spirituality, for nourishment. The only thing I don't use it for is for industrial benefits, actually. But I use it for the full spectrum of benefits. So I feel I can represent those aspects. Also, my personal home grow setup, which I've documented to the Home Office with that grow your own VAT analysis.
Yep.
I do feel is adequate for one person to kind of provide for themselves, sort of thing. Sure. So it's, you know, it's not 7 plants, let's put it that way, because 7 plants isn't adequate for someone with a real chronic health condition to achieve what I like to call herbal independence day. You know, I've achieved my herbal independence day. It's taken me many years of growing, and it all comes down to floor space and how many watts and your environment. So I've been held back for quite some time from walking myself into the police station now by quite a lot of people. So how would we go about starting such a test case is the first question.
Look, I'm not going to encourage you to go and hand yourself in or get yourself arrested, Phil. Obviously, if it was to happen, then I am here and I will help you, and you know, we will take it from there. But that's not something as a lawyer I can advise you to do.
I understand that. I mean, I have written to.
I'll tell you a funny story, actually, Phil. When my previous life, when I was a criminal defence lawyer, we had a client who he had a bit of a chaotic lifestyle, and he phoned us one day and he said, "Oh, I've been kicked out by my missus. I've got nowhere to sleep tonight. What should I do? What should I do?" And we were like, "Well, you know, there's nothing we can do about that." And I remember my boss speaking to him on the phone. He called like 20 times, and he's like, "Look, I've got nowhere to sleep. I want to be able to sleep at the police station. What should I do?" And then my boss was just like, "Look, I can't tell you what to do. I can't tell you what to do." The guy wouldn't stop. So my boss eventually said, "I don't know, just throw a brick through the window or something like that." We came to the office the next day and he'd thrown a brick through our window. Yeah, and got himself arrested and got a bed for the night. So you know, that's the position we are in. We can't encourage people to.
So of course you couldn't encourage that for the obvious risks, I suppose, because if it wasn't successful again, it could have severe implications upon myself or whichever individual took the case forward, I presume. My second question would be then, because myself and the community have come to learn over the years that, like, the barristers constrained by the courts in what they can and can't say and things. So, you know, would you be able to represent me in that case, or would I have to represent myself, do you think?
I think so. Look, this is it. We would have to identify a barrister who was supportive of the CEDAR future position and was willing to put it forward in court. That's not always the easiest thing to do, but ultimately, what we would want is to put that position forward. The likelihood is you would be convicted by a jury, and then you take that up to the Court of Appeal. And once you're in the Court of Appeal, then you can sort of really dig down into as CEDAR Future say, you know, the primary evidence behind the legislation. That would be the aim, to end up in the Court of Appeal and have a substantial review of the current position, like they did with Quayle in 2005, but much wider than that, not restricted to a defence of medical necessity. Yeah. So it may be a case of you would want to represent yourself in the Crown Court, put forward your defence, and then at the appeal stage, then you bring in counsel, because as we know, it's difficult sometimes to persuade barristers to be a bit radical and to do something more maverick.
Yes, yes.
So that would be the situation.
It's a shame. I'd hoped that they would see the injustice of the legislation and feel compelled to try and write it in the name of law and order.
Yeah.
But, that hasn't been the case. It seems that the fear is that the judges are worried about getting involved in politics. Seems to be the general vibe. Would you say?
Yeah. I think this is the issue. If you try and say, look, the law is wrong, a judge's response will be, well, you should take that up with your MP and you should take that up with your member, you know.
Which I've done to the full extent possible. Of course. So a judge possibly couldn't say that to me. And also, I'd be wanting to, because there's a lot of confirmational bias in society, I've got a right to a fair, impartial trial. So the jury would need re-educating completely about their misinformation, and their preconceptions of cannabis. You know, would a judge permit such discussion in a courtroom?
Yeah, look, the judge is there to direct the jury on the law. So obviously you could put forward your position and say the law is wrong, and that would be your defense. It may be that the judge directs the jury that this is not a valid defense and that they should disregard it. Whether the jury would do that or not, that's still their decision. It can, you know, a jury can disregard the judge's directions, but it's a powerful direction that the judge will give. And there was a recent case, I think it was in Swansea, I can't remember exactly where someone put forward a defense for, they were selling hemp flower.
Yes.
And they were charged with sale and supply of Class B drug. And they put forward the defense that, you know, 0.2% or less THC is legal and there's no problem with that. And in fact, what happened at half time in the case, the judge directed the jury that this was not a defense in law. And so the chap had a very difficult decision on whether to just take his chances and hope the jury had sympathy for him, or take the second option, which is what he did. He decided to plead guilty at half time. You know, he and his legal counsel, I wasn't involved in the case, but he and his legal counsel felt that the judge's direction was sufficiently powerful as to probably seal his fate. And so he decided to plead guilty and try and get a little bit of credit at that point. So that's the issue with the judge. You know, they're not going to stop you from putting forward your defense and your position, but they very well could tell the jury this is not a valid defense.
Which is perfectly fine, because like you say, then I might just be found guilty anyway and then move on to appeal. That's just one of the stepping stones, I suppose. Give the jury a chance to nullify, and if they don't, then move to appeal.
Exactly.
Okay, I mean, that sounds like a good plan to me, actually. I'm well up for that. I
know you're up for it, Phil, but you know, I will obviously do everything I can to assist you, but I will always make the warnings and tell you.
Yes. I mean, I haven't been in court since I was a child. I've been in court 3 times in my life, actually. Once when I visited as a child with the school, once when I was 14, because I'd broken into some holiday homes, shame to say, whilst I was a youngster in North Wales and I'd run away from home. And what was the other one? To see my brother in court, actually. So, they're my only experiences. It's not like I'm able to go in there and boldly defend myself with loads of experience, but it's not to say I won't try, Lo. You know what I mean?
No, you're very intelligent and very eloquent, Phil. I have no doubt you could put forward a very strong case on your own.
Okay, that's reassuring.
But again, I'm not encouraging.
No, I get that. I won't say Rob told me to do it. What about cost in such a situation? If that did happen then, I'm completely broke. Would I get legal aid and stuff like that? And I'd be representing myself. So how does that all work, you know?
Well, you would be eligible for legal aid. You're entitled to tell the court, thank you, I don't want legal aid. You can revoke that and I will represent myself. That's your right. And you would be treated as a litigant in person. From a costs perspective, if you were to lose the case, there would be an order made against you in relation to the prosecution costs. But prosecution costs are always substantially lower than high court litigation costs. You know, the CPS has a budget to do what they're doing. They're effectively bringing the case against you. So it wouldn't be fair for them to say, right, we want hundreds of thousands of pounds or anything ridiculous like that.
And what about the idea of holding the individual officers liable for as they arrest somebody and, trying it that way? Do you think that's conceivable, or is it the same issue again there of you have to be able to prove to the courts that you can cover costs, etc.? Yeah,
no, look, there's also public policy issues in place. Police officers are generally, it's agreed, police officers, firemen, ambulance crew, that sort of thing. They won't be prosecuted if they are acting in accordance with their execution of their duty. So, for example, when a police officer is conducting a chase in their vehicle and they turn on the sirens and the lights and everything, if they were to run someone over, an innocent bystander, and that person died, there would obviously be a civil action for the family to recover costs or compensation. But that police officer would never be prosecuted because the position is a police officer needs to be able to do his job, and that sometimes means driving fast to chase after criminals. So it's a situation like that.
Interesting one. Okay. Thank you very much for explaining the situation. The barrister still he's like he hasn't said the merits have changed. There's a reluctance in the air from the judges. I was thinking.
I think his view is the risk of exposure to a very very substantial costs order and a requirement for security is just going to be prohibitive.
Yes, yeah.
If the WTU had an extremely wealthy benefactor who was willing to bankroll matters, yeah, exactly, and agree to bear the burden,
yes,
on behalf of the membership, then that would be fine. I think we would all feel much more comfortable about it. But we can't ask individual members to cough up hundreds of thousands to pay the government. It's mad.
I know someone said to us, I think it was Alan Buffy, who's been campaigning longer than I've been breathing. I think we could put through someone through law school for that price.
Well, yeah, exactly.
They take a bit late. I don't even know if it would take long. Something crossed my mind actually, although I'm not like a business person. It occurred to me, like at the minute, for example, WTU have got 6,100 and something members. Let's just say if 5,000 people put £50 in every 3 months, that would be £250,000 every 3 months. Potentially £1 million in a 12-month contract. Could a contract be drawn up whereby people could invest in the case and, if successful, guarantees that their investment would be returned? And also, if we were successful, would we be able to claim damages for what they've put us through?
Oh, two difficult questions. I think that the first issue, in terms of calling it an investment, is problematic because it's financial advice and it's highly regulated, and I don't think anyone should be giving investment advice for something like this. I imagine counsel say it's not a good investment. Yeah. And that because he thinks it's a challenging case, and gamble, isn't it? The odds are stacked against us, Phil. The High Court is the intersection of the individual and the state, so there is often an imbalance. The second part, sorry, just remind me what the second part was.
Would we, if successful, would we be eligible for compensation?
Oh yeah,
damages they put us through by refusing to change the law for so many years.
I don't know. I mean, you probably have to have some sort of public inquiry or something to allocate.
Very much like a public inquiry into their conflicted interest.
Yeah, and you'd have to sort of prove bad faith, that the government had been acting in bad faith, and look.
You can't prove that.
These things often get whitewashed, don't they? The vigil in Clapham Common for Sarah Evenden. They've just had an inquiry into the police conduct and completely exonerated them, which sounds a bit mad to me, but there you go.
I see what you're saying. Really, we are in a lovely, perfect world. This would be quite straightforward and simple, but we don't live in a lovely, perfect world, do we?
No, but that's why perhaps the test case, the individual issues of a particular person might be a much more appropriate vehicle.
And another aspect that is highly important to myself and millions others is our right to the freedom of association. I know most people at the minute are denied that right anyway under the current health emergency, but aside from the current health emergency, people who choose to consume cannabis, let's just say for health and well-being purposes, shall we? Because very few people choose to consume it because it makes them feel bad. Most do so because it improves their life or sense of well-being in some way. We would like to have equal rights as all other people in the country, the right to congregate and practice our beliefs in private without any interference from the state until we harm others. In other words, we'd like cannabis social clubs or cannabis community clubs, where the clubs perhaps had the right to grow their own, or cultivate, technically speaking, their own cannabis for their own members under license. So licensed cultivators and distributors and venues for consumption. Can you see anyway, because at the minute licensing doesn't allow for that, it only allows for huge companies to cultivate and then sell for vast profit. So is there any way that we can kind of focus on the fact that this is entirely a licensing issue? All this comes down to is I haven't got the right license, and if you haven't got the right license, you get prosecuted. Is there anything we can do there?
Yeah, I tell you who probably the experts on that issue would be Gary Ouds and the chilling room guys. You know, they've been doing a lot of work in this area for some time now, so I haven't caught up with them in a little while. So I don't know how far they've progressed, but I imagine they would be able to give you a very detailed overview of that.
I
Of
like
what's
that.
going on with
Gary Yowes is kind of moving for the community and the clubs, and there's me going for the personal, individual, self-sufficiency type aspect, and
Yeah,
like
I
different
understand.
aspects of the same fight. Okay, thank you, Rob.
No worries.
I think that covers all the update we needed for council there for the group.
Yeah.
So thank you for taking the time to discuss that with me, Rob, and we'll
No
see
worries.
you again soon.